Do you think that Jon Jones asking for what he's wanting at Dana and the back and forth battle, should that be a headline news, or should that just be something they handle? Like, I think that the media, and this is a reason why I don't like a lot of the mainstream MMA, I shouldn't say mainstream, but just some of the MMA media, is they sensationalize this stuff, and all it does is it harms either the UFC, which is how they make their money by having the UFC put events on, or they harm the fighters. And I think when they put a post out like they did last night, MMAfighting.com, somewhere along the lines of Jon Jones wanting $50 million, says coach, like his coach says he wants $50 million. I think it was Winklejohn did an interview, and the headline was, because he said something about Floyd Mayweather getting $100 million, he thinks Jon Jones should get 50. Now, that was the headline. Now, I think the majority of people will go against the UFC on that and say he should get the $50 million, but there's going to be a lot of people that's going to hate Jon, even though Jon had nothing to do with it, thinking, that's a lot of money and why it's kind of selfish. And it's just like, I think the media, they're just doing whatever they can. And the one entity that hasn't ever paid fighters or Winklejohn or the UFC or anybody for any of these headlines that they're making money on is the actual media outlets that are reporting that people are getting ripped off one way or another. And so I just don't think it should be headlines, in my opinion. And I think it's just business. And I think it's good for these fighters to have to get versed in business and have to battle companies, especially as big as UFC and Dana, and have to learn business, because they're going to have to do it when they get out of fighting anyway. So that the more they do it now and have to go back and forth and negotiate and try to get what they want, when the UFC is trying to get what they want, I think it's good for them.
Mm-hmm. I think the media does a really good job at trying to find things that get people, intrigued. And a lot of times it's it's drama and it's the stuff that's controversial. And to them, I do think that the money has always been very controversial for MMA athletes, because when you look at the amount of sacrifice an MMA athlete goes through versus any other athlete, and maybe I'm biased because I'm an MMA athlete.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not just a seasonal sport. It's something that you do all year round, and you have you don't just have a boxing coach. You have a boxing coach. You have a grappling coach. Then you have a cage coach, then you have a therapist, and then you have a nutritionist, and then you have a manager, and then all these things. And so when it comes down to the money, by the time, you've done paid out everybody, you still have to pay the taxes on all of that. You're left with pennies, and it is real frustrating. And I think the media just sympathizes for the fighter in that sense. I do agree with you when I think it's important for the fighter to be able to stand their ground and negotiate. But the fighters, they're fighters for a reason, because that's what they do. They're not financially equipped or mentally equipped with the financial know-how to negotiate these contracts. And a lot of the times, the numbers are skewed because they don't want them to know who has what leverage, so that you can, negotiate properly. And I don't know, you were a fighter. How do you feel about how many years you fought versus the amount of money you made?
See, the thing is, the difference is now I'm in business, and I've been in business since I was in the UFC. So I understand it from a different perspective. Like in business, we both know Dana. We know he's a giving person. We know he also stands for and fights for what he believes in. And we know that, he's running a business at the end of the day. And the thing is, this is why this article bothered me, is because the headline said $50 million. Now, that's putting it in the fans' eyes that he should make $50 million. And if he makes anything less than that, it's UFC's fault. That's not the case. That was based on Floyd Mayweather. Now, Winklejohn isn't an expert on how fights or how much fighters should get paid from the structure of the deals and the promotion aspect. None of us are, right? The promoters know that stuff, the business side. But what we do know is Mayweather has the best financial arrangement of any sports athlete in the history of sports athletes. He has an entire business built around himself. He is the promoter. He is the fighter. He is the machine. He is the company. He has every single thing. So Floyd Mayweather takes care of Floyd Mayweather. He doesn't take care of 600 other fighters. He doesn't take care of doing deals and doing marketing and building up machines and spending the amount of money that the UFC does, so that other people like yourself can make a living off fighting as well. Be it that you make enough or don't make enough. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's a different situation. Floyd Mayweather takes care of Floyd Mayweather, and so he can keep all of the money. And when you go to a Floyd Mayweather fight and you buy a drink in the audience at the concession stand, he's getting a piece of that. He's getting a piece of every single TV deal, every single network deal, and so you can't compare that to something like this. And you throw that number out there, and then that makes the fans think, oh wow, that's a lot of money, and either he deserves it or he's being greedy and doesn't deserve it, because you got Derek Lewis saying, hell, for $8 million, I'll fight all day, so he'll probably fight for $5 million or whatever the case. So I think it causes negative vibes for everyone, and they don't care. That's the thing. They're just trying to get views. They're just trying to make advertising dollars, and that's what bothers me. But from a business, to go back to your question, from a business perspective, I'm around contracts and running business. I have 50 employees here. I'm involved in other businesses, and I've sold other businesses and built them in the past. And when you sign a contract, for the fans that are watching this, and just so you know, when you're in business and you sign a contract, it's a contract. Like it would be impossible for me to think, if I had a contract with somebody and it was a set amount of work that I had to do for them or a commitment to them, that I can just at any time say, I'm going to get this contract changed, and I want you to pay me more money, and I'm going to do the same job that I agreed to do and signed to do. It is almost a 0% chance that's going to happen unless I have leverage on my side. I have something on my side that's going to make that person have more value in order to give me more money. So
what do you think the leverage is? The leverage is the biggest fight in MMA history, Jon Jones versus Ngannou.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
it is some leverage, yeah.
To ask for that much money? I think it is. And I don't know, I don't know the numbers that the UFC is bringing in, but so what you're saying basically is, if Jon wants that fight, he needs to go off and build his own promotion and tell Ngannou to break ties with the UFC and come off and do just this one-off fight with him and Ngannou with their own promotion and do it that way?
Absolutely. That is the only way he will make Floyd Mayweather money. If he is the promoter, the entire company, the entire business is built around him. He promotes the entire thing and sets everything up with his team. He will 100% make the most amount of money, and it will come down to the pay-per-view buys, how much the fight sells, and he will get the biggest chunk of it 100%. That's exactly what I'm saying. But that's not realistic, because he doesn't have that team around him, and neither does any other athlete on the planet, which is what separates Floyd Mayweather from everybody else. Why he is so rich and makes so much money, because he's the boss of everything when he fights, and he pays the fighter that he fights enough to get the fight done and make the big fights. But what I am saying is, I'm not saying Jon doesn't deserve the money or does. I think it's good that they're going back and forth, and I think it's great that he's asking for as much as he can. But the leverage is what comes into play, and I think not having the belt and not having as much leverage, other than the fact that people want to see this fight, takes away from it. Because if it gets to a point where Dana doesn't agree with the amount of money, Dana's going to say no and get Derek Lewis, and they're going to put the fight together, boost Derek Lewis like crazy on social media, and build him to like they did with Masvidal, like they did with all these other guys, to build him up to a superstar level, and they'll make a fight. Now, they won't make as much as Jon Jones and Francis, 100%, but they won't pay as much either for it. So I think the play here, if it was me, would be to not go to the media so that it becomes negative for everyone. Handle the situation with Dana, make the most amount of money that me and my team can possibly squeeze out of Dana, take the fight, beat Ngannou, take the heavyweight belt, and now you have the leverage. Now you just beat one of the scariest guys in the division. You have the belt. Now you have leverage.
Ngannou, there's nobody outside of him. That's you know what I mean? Like, outside, like, once he's already beat him, that's it. Then there's nobody else to fight. Like, he's the top of the top.
I'm just saying how he'll get the most money. I don't see him getting as much as he's wanting, but I think he'll make enough to be happy, honestly. I think they'll come to a reasonable decision, and something will happen. Everybody wants to see the fight. And like I said, I agree with the fact that they're having this battle, because Jon, and I'm not saying Jon's a bad business person, but I'm saying he's getting business experience, and he can't be a very experienced business person because he's putting all of his time into fighting. Like every fighter, you can't do both. You know, like, I'm all business now, so it's like I'm learning more and more every day about business. But when I was a fighter, it was all fighting, and I had to have advisors and work as much as I could on business. So I learned very slowly. I think this is great for him to get that experience, and he's dealing with such a big company, a multi-billion-dollar company, such a big boss like Dana. I think it's good experience for him to try to work on, learning about business, learning about negotiations, and it's interesting to see what's going to happen. So I guess the question just was, do you think it should be a headline, or do you think it should just be behind the scenes and we just find out how the fight gets happened?
I don't know how else to say it except for that. I don't think that what the media is talking about, I don't think they know everything. I think
Right.
they're just kind of speculating, you know what I mean? Because the real conversations are happening behind doors.
Absolutely.
And the important conversations are happening behind doors and not being spoken to the media about. And so I just think that the media kind of caught a bit of it and they're just trying to run with it.
And I do want to say I've said things in the past where I don't agree with Jon Jones, and I just speak my mind. I'm very honest, but I will say, not just because you're friends and you train with him, I do hope he gets the fight. I want to see it. And I think he is not scared 100%. I do not believe the people that are saying that he's afraid to fight Francis Ngannou. I don't think that man's afraid to fight anybody. And anybody that says that is ridiculous. This is a man who's never been beat. He's fought everybody. He's had tough fights. Where I'm sure when he's had those close fights that he had, which, I mean, like I said, when you get guys that are undefeated, you've shown up sick, you've shown up injured, you've shown up with stress and all these things and had to go out there and fight. And maybe you took a loss because of it and you couldn't say anything. Or maybe you had a win, but it was hard. It was really, really hard to get that win. For him to be undefeated for so long, no matter how hard some of those fights are, he's had to show up sick and get wins. He's had to show up injured and get wins. He's had to show up with stress in his life, maybe a family death or a relationship problem and get wins. That says a lot to me. Like guys like Khabib, guys like Jon Jones that are on these huge undefeated streaks, like the old Vanderlei and the old Anderson Silva back in those days. So I definitely don't think he's afraid of the fight. I definitely think he's ready. The guy's training like an animal, and I am very looking forward to seeing it. I'm curious to see how it comes out and how everything works out as far as the fight gets made.
Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome if he could break some records as far as a fighter's purse for the UFC, and if he fights for it, it just makes it better for all the rest of us. I would agree with you in the sense that the difference between boxing pay and MMA pay is a lot of times like the top tier in boxing. It's only the top tier boxers that get paid ridiculous
Right.
amounts of
Absolutely.
money. I would say like the 1% only, really,
Yep.
probably a handful of people, like
Yeah.
a dozen, just the people that everybody knows. And then outside of that, they're not getting paid as well. When you look at MMA, or I should probably say the UFC, I think it's, first of all, the UFC does an amazing job at stacking the cards. And when you tune into a UFC fight, all the fighters from top to bottom, and all the fighters across the board are getting paid more. Like if you kind of like on average, I guess is the best way to explain it.